question, we do know that these are designated terrorist organizations, so we treat them like the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere, just as a note.
But that was not the question I asked.
I know there's more to that question. I just think it's important for the public to understand that. There's no willy-nilly targeting of drug boats. We know exactly who these people are affiliated with.
I was asking about what's on the boats.
On Iran, ultimately, I would defer to the White House and White House counsel on that. However, we are in a ceasefire right now.
Senator Tim Kaine asked Secretary Pete Hegseth one simple legal question about the War Powers Resolution, about a 60-day deadline, about congressional approval. Secretary Pete Hegseth had no clear answer, and the clock is already running out. Stay right here because this affects every American.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hurst, I want you to just confirm something for me about the president's submitted budget. $1.5 trillion is about a 40+% increase from FY26. Am I right that not a penny of that is to go to a pay raise for the 800,000 civilians who work for the Department of Defense?
We have 4.2% of a civilian salary set aside for bonuses to make sure we can recognize high performers in the civilian workforce.
But you have guaranteed pay raises for the active duty and the Guard and Reserve component, but no guaranteed raises for
There are
civilians.
guaranteed raises for the military, but in the last year, this department's given out more civilian bonuses.
Well, if we're going to increase the defense budget by that much, I would hope the committee would take a look at this. Chairman Kaine, man, I like the sound of that, Chairman Kaine. General Kaine, I want to ask you a question about Southern Spear. It's an operational question. I know from your background that you carefully act to keep military actions within the rules of war. What legal justification could there possibly be that would allow the U.S. military to strike boats in international waters and kill the occupants of those boats without a showing of evidence that there's narcotics on those boats?
Well, sir, as you know, our job is to show the range of options, the associated risks, and then take those execution orders, transmit them down to the COCOMs on legally appropriate and legally backstopped actions.
Could you give me a legal justification?
Well, sir, the execution order, I don't have
striking boats that do not have evidence that they're carrying narcotics?
I apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I don't have a copy of the order issued to Southcom with me today. It's classified in its own right, which clearly articulates, based on a variety of criteria, what constitutes a valid military and legally valid target in that theater. And I know, I just want to say I know and trust that our commanders at echelon are rigorously following that legal opinion and those legal boundaries upon which we've been issued those orders.
And General Kaine, I would encourage, again, my colleagues, I am at a disadvantage. I've seen the legal opinion, but I can't talk about it because it's classified. I've seen the targeting criteria, but I can't talk about them because they're classified. I've seen the secret list of DTOs against whom we have declared war that even they haven't been informed of, but I can't talk about it because it's classified. But I would urge all of my colleagues to go to the SCIF and read the targeting criteria and get briefed about it, and then also look at all of the files of all the strikes that have taken place. I've done that with the first 46 strikes or so. And I think there's a profound mismatch between what is occurring and the underlying assumptions in the legal opinion. And I would just encourage my colleagues to dig into this. To Secretary Hegseth and General Kaine, the War Powers Resolution specifies that a war initiated by a president without congressional approval must be concluded within 60 days. It can be extended by an additional 30 days if, quote, the president determines and certifies to Congress in writing that unavoidable military necessity respecting the safety of the U.S. Armed Forces requires the continued use of such armed forces in the course of bringing about a prompt removal of such forces. We're right at the 60-day deadline. Is the president intending to either seek congressional authorization for the war in Iran or send us the legally required certification that he needs an additional 30 days to remove U.S. forces from the war?
Just briefly on the previous question, we do know that these are designated terrorist organizations, so we treat them like the Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere, just as a note.
But that was not the question I asked.
I know there's more to that question. I just think it's important for the public to understand that. There's no willy-nilly targeting of drug boats. We know exactly who these people are affiliated with.
I was asking about what's on the boats.
On Iran. Ultimately, I would defer to the White House and White House counsel on that. However, we are in a ceasefire right now, which our understanding means the 60-day clock pauses or stops in a ceasefire. You're not in. Yeah. It's our understanding, just so you know.
Okay, well, I do not believe the statute would support that. I think the 60 days runs maybe tomorrow, and it's going to pose a really important legal question for the administration. We have serious constitutional concerns, and we don't want to layer those with additional statutory concerns. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Let us slow this down because what Senator Tim Kaine just walked into is one of the most serious legal confrontations between Congress and the executive branch that we have seen in a very long time. And most people have no idea it is even happening. So let us start from the beginning. Senator Tim Kaine is not just any senator asking questions. He is a former governor, a former mayor, and a sitting member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He understands the law, he understands military operations, and he understands exactly what he was asking Secretary Pete Hegseth. The first question Senator Tim Kaine raised was about the defense budget. The president submitted a budget of $1.5 trillion, which is roughly a 40% increase from the previous fiscal year. That is an enormous amount of money. And Senator Tim Kaine pointed out something that most people completely missed. Not a single penny of that increase is going toward pay raises for the 800,000 civilian employees who work for the Department of Defense. 800,000 people. These are not contractors, these are not lobbyists. These are full-time civilian employees who keep the military running every single day. Logistics, maintenance, administration, technology, communications. All of it depends on these 800,000 people. And while active duty military members and members of the National Guard and Reserve are getting guaranteed pay raises, the civilians who support them are getting nothing guaranteed. What they were offered instead was a bonus pool, about 4.2% of civilian salaries set aside for performance bonuses. But a bonus is not a raise. A bonus can be taken away, a bonus is not guaranteed, and a bonus does not keep pace with the rising cost of living. Senator Tim Kaine made clear that if Congress is going to approve a budget increase of this size, the committee needs to take a serious look at whether the people doing the actual day-to-day work are being treated fairly. That is a reasonable expectation, and it deserved a clearer response than it got. But then Senator Tim Kaine moved to the bigger issue, and this is where the hearing became genuinely alarming. Senator Tim Kaine asked about an operation called Southern Spear. Southern Spear involves United States military forces striking boats in international waters and killing the people on those boats. Now, Senator Tim Kaine asked one very specific and very important legal question. What legal justification allows the United States military to strike boats in international waters and kill the occupants of those boats without any confirmed evidence that those boats are actually carrying narcotics? Read that again slowly. Killing people in international waters without confirmed evidence of a crime. The general in the room said the orders were classified, the targeting criteria were classified, and the legal opinion justifying all of it was classified. And Senator Tim Kaine did something remarkable. He said plainly, "I have seen the legal opinion, but I cannot discuss it because it is classified. I have seen the targeting criteria, but I cannot discuss them because they are classified. I have seen the secret list of organizations against whom we have effectively declared war, organizations that have not even been told they are on that list, but I cannot discuss it because it is classified." And then Senator Tim Kaine said something that every American needs to hear. He said he has personally reviewed the files from the first 46 strikes, and he believes there is a profound mismatch between what is actually happening on the ground and the legal assumptions being used to justify those strikes. He is not saying this casually. He is a lawyer, he has read the classified materials, and he is telling his colleagues publicly, go to the secure facility, read the targeting criteria yourself, look at the strike files, and then decide whether what is happening matches what is being described to you. That is a serious warning from a serious person. And then Senator Tim Kaine got to the most urgent legal question of the entire hearing, the War Powers Resolution. Here is what the War Powers Resolution says in plain language. If a president starts a war without congressional approval, that war must end within 60 days. The president can ask for an additional 30 days, but only if he sends Congress a written certification explaining that military necessity requires it. Senator Tim Kaine pointed out that the 60-day deadline was right at the edge, possibly expiring the very next day. And he asked Secretary Pete Hegseth directly, is the president going to seek congressional authorization for this war, or is he going to send the legally required written certification to extend the timeline? Secretary Pete Hegseth's answer was that the administration believes the 60-day clock pauses during a ceasefire. Senator Tim Kaine responded immediately. He said he does not believe the law supports that interpretation, and he is right to be concerned, because the War Powers Resolution does not include a ceasefire pause provision. That interpretation, the idea that a ceasefire stops the legal clock, does not appear in the text of the law, which means the administration may be operating a war in a legal gray zone, using an interpretation of the law that has never been tested or approved by any court. Senator Tim Kaine ended by saying the situation already raises serious constitutional concerns, and the administration should not be adding statutory violations on top of those concerns. That is the core of what happened in this hearing. Senator Tim Kaine laid out 3 serious problems: 800,000 civilian defense workers going without guaranteed pay raises, while the defense budget balloons to $1.5 trillion. United States military forces striking and killing people in international waters based on classified legal opinions that may not hold up to scrutiny, and a war in Iran that may already be operating outside the legal boundaries set by the War Powers Resolution, with a deadline that the administration is trying to pause, using a legal argument that does not exist in the actual law. Secretary Pete Hegseth did not have clear answers to any of these questions, and the American people, the ones paying for this budget, the ones whose sons and daughters are serving in this war, deserve those answers. If this breakdown helped you understand what is actually happening in that hearing room, share it with someone who needs to know, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe so you are ready when we break down the next one.